Thanks. I was hoping I would avoid being the first speaker, but honestly, I'm not the best person in terms of stats, and I expect that Donna and others will be able to address that more clearly. But I have been pursuing over the past week or so the contents of this interesting book, which is titled Abused Men, The Hidden Side of Domestic Violence, and with lots of case stories in there about men's experience. And this is very new to me. I've read a lot about women's experience, so I was very keen to hear what the men themselves had to say about their experience of domestic violence. And the author makes the point that we really should let the men speak for themselves about what it's like to be a victim. The first chapter, he spends attempting to convince the reader that most violence is mutual and that the number of male victims is equal, at least in the US. But I'll let someone else tackle those. Just thought I'd mention some of the things that the men talk about in terms of their experience of being victims. Many of them haven't actually experienced being physically hit, which I thought was interesting. Many of them talk about having objects thrown at them as a very common experience of violence by their female partners. And a couple of them had received stitches as a result of a cup or a plate being thrown at their head. But the author does make the point that in most cases the objects miss and smash on the ground. So I thought, oh well, that's interesting. So there's a bit of violence through objects. The next thing in the list that he presents is sleep deprivation. That some of the female perpetrators are depriving the men of sleep. Now, I've got two children, one 7 and 5, and I know that I, and particularly my partner, has suffered a great deal of sleep deprivation, and it is very difficult thing, but it just struck me as a very odd thing to come second in the list as an example of domestic violence, is waking someone up. Third in the list is an incident of biting, where a woman had bit her husband on the bum, and I'll just read out his words to you, because again I thought this is rather odd. So what happened? She just bit me on the arse. I thought I had her pinned down, but she wriggled free and got me. So I thought that doesn't quite sound like the sort of things that I hear women experiencing in terms of men. Men aren't usually biting women on the bums when they're pinning down their male partners. The fourth example given is the author's attempt to make a comparison to the most egregious behaviour of punching a pregnant woman in the stomach, which is not uncommon apparently. And the best corollary he can think of is women attacking the groin or the testicles of the male. And I thought, well, that's got some comparison there. But again, the author has to admit that in most cases these were attempts or threats, and very rarely was there actual injury made. And then it sort of starts to peter out in terms of victims' actual experience of violence, which surprises me because the first chapter is very strong on how men are underreporting. It then moves on to say, well, what is a man's main emotional experience as a result of this? And the section is headed bewilderment. Not fear, not terror, not being controlled, but bewilderment. And I think that in itself says to me something about the difference between the majority of men's experience of violence by their female partners, which makes it qualitatively different to the terror that women are more likely to feel. So I might just stop there for a moment.